Welcome back to the Breach Report from PurpleSec. My name is Joshua Allen. I'm here with Jason Firch again. This week we'll be following up on a couple of attacks we've already talked about, as well as investigating some interesting new malware that's come out. So our first attack comes as a follow-up to Accellion. We talked about them before with their FTA server. They've been responsible for a few breaches now, and this is probably going to be a trend for a while, as it typically is, as people do their investigation and find that they were breached.
Yeah, and this is another cybersecurity firm. We've been tracking this over the last few weeks of especially software-based security firms being a point of entry for a lot of these attackers, and then it's just seeping down into the supply chain. It's hitting all of their customers and compromising them, as you can kind of see in this example here.
Supply chain attacks are extremely effective, and that's why we're still talking about Accellion and SolarWinds. So Qualys, I think it's a pretty big name, but if you don't know Qualys, Qualys does a lot of web security. You can get your website kind of scanned for free there to check your SSL certs, and they do a bunch of quite a bit more stuff now. They used to be kind of lightweight, but major security company. Same guys against Clop. That's what their ransomware has been called. It's attacked this Accellion FTA, which is the file transfer appliance. It's a legacy software appliance that's been around for about 20 years. There were a few patches that failed, and there was ultimately one that did manage to patch this, but not before a lot of people were breached. So they received the exact same letter everyone else did. That's a pretty typical form letter right there. It's copy and pasted for everybody.
Yeah, and there have been a lot of big names. Bombardier, the Canadian airline company. Um, who else? University of Colorado,
Mhm.
Kroger. A lot of
Kroger,
big
yep.
names. Big names.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's targeted financially, which again we see here: orders, invoices, tax documents, and scan reports. So I think this means vulnerability scan reports, which is great because then you can kind of see where else you can attack in a network. Um, so they also posted this up online, or allegedly they have. That's something that they sent to all of the other victims, as well as, here's a screenshot of your data up on our website, and we will continue to post more unless you pay the ransom. Whether or not that information is 100% legit, or if it's just a screenshot and a threat, that still stands to be investigated. Um, Now, what Qualys is doing here is, they've confirmed there's no impact to their production environments, so nothing was actually encrypted. It didn't affect their code base, didn't affect their customers at all. They had their FTA server in a segregated DMZ environment, completely separate from systems that hosted and supported Qualys products to transfer information as part of our customer support
let,
system.
let me ask you a quick question on that. As a security professional, how many times have you heard we've segregated our network,
Yep.
but we still got hacked?
Yeah, and some of the other FTA victims said the exact same thing. Yeah, plenty of times, but uh, I mean, you still you still got breached, right? So I don't know how isolated you can really call that. I mean, if you
But
can
it's a good
access the
practice,
internet,
though. It's a good
it
practice,
is.
though,
It is.
right?
Yeah.
So if you're practicing segregated environments, hit the thumbs up button. If you are, if you're
Yeah.
not, hit the
So
thumbs down.
something about that is you're doing what's called, or you're mitigating what's called the splash damage, right? So you accept that, well, we've got something legacy. It is more likely to be attacked than the other things we have in our network. So, you know, if it does, we can limit what it actually can get into, or what can be damaged by that attack, by putting it in a smaller network.
Right, but it's traditionally used as a layer, not to be relied on, as it seems in this case. But so speaking of supply chain attacks, I think we have another one that we wanted to follow up on, and that's the latest on the SolarWinds attack.
Yes. So surprise, surprise, more SolarWinds. This one, so what we're going to be talking about here is not a specific attack against any company, but more information on the actual malware and some of what it's doing that was included in the attack. This comes from Microsoft and FireEye. Those two have been collaborating on this pretty much since it started. One interesting thing here is they no longer call it Solarigate by Microsoft, and it's now called Nobelium. Still UNC 2542 by FireEye.
How do you feel about that? Did you like Solari Gate or Nobelium?
Well, I just messed up it. I mess it up every time I say it. I always say Solarigate first, so maybe Nobelium's easier to say.
You know what? You know what? I'm leaning towards UNC 2542 because that way there's no confusion. It just is.
It's like naming stars, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So, just to give a quick background on that, Nobelium was able to create a backdoor in SolarWinds Orion Network Management Platform plugin. Again, another plugin from somebody else. Supply chain attack here. It was delivered to almost 18,000 organizations all over the planet starting last March, before being discovered in September. So what they were able to do is download their malicious code into SolarWinds repository, and everybody who did a good job and they patched their SolarWinds was infected. So this comes in afterward. This is what's called a second stage backdoor, and it's got a couple other components to it.
So hold on. I know what a backdoor is. Gives you entry. What's a second stage backdoor?
So it also gives you entry, but it's typically meant to be it's more efficient, right? It's
Okay.
designed to do some more specific tasks. So the first backdoor will get you in. It'll get you probably some limited access. You're going to try to escalate your privilege as much as you can, but you're going to hit a point where you're going to need to execute code. You want to move files around, and usually doing that, on the first backdoor is a typical scenario, but with
Mhm.
an advanced persistent threat, in order for them to continue to evade and continue moving, you want to set up a secondary connection so that if the first attack was caught, you're not actually using that same mode of transportation for the rest of what you're trying to do in the network.
I see. So they initially established that foothold, set the back door, and then immediately try to establish a second connection just so that they have a continuous access,
Right, it's like more parallel tools.
redundant access, I guess. Yeah, parallel.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely, redundant or parallel. So the first one's called GoldMax or Sun Shuttle. That's the actual second stage backdoor that's dropped in after the initial compromise to the system. Um, the most notable part about GoldMax is the fact that it can select refers from a list of popular website URLs, including Bing.com, Yahoo.com, Facebook.com, and Google.com, as this threat post article says. So this helps them blend in with legitimate traffic. And um, this referrer here is a HTTP tag, or I'm sorry, an HTML tag. Excuse me there. It's an HTML tag that says where the traffic came from. So the fact that they're using Bing, Yahoo, Facebook, and Google means that this traffic's trying to hide as just your normal user activity searches and day-to-day Facebook at work.
I see. So it's showing that the traffic is coming from that channel, from that source. And so if someone were to look at the analytics, they wouldn't know any different. They would just say, okay, well that looks like someone's searching on Google and they're landing on the page, or they're hitting that you know particular URL.
Right. Like that probably wouldn't get past, an actual human eye threat researcher, but you might not trigger Splunk or something with that,
Hmm.
right? So once the backdoor is executed, which by the way is written in the Go programming language, which is the first
Okay.
time I've seen that on malware.
Interesting. If you know anything about Go, hit us up. We're interested in learning more about some of these malware languages.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know much about Go. I learned Java, and I know most malware is written in like Perl and Python usually when I see it. So, yeah, what I'm really curious to know is, why is there something more efficient about Go, or is it just because everybody's using it, so maybe to execute's easier. But yeah, if you know, leave us a comment. So, anyways, this backdoor executes. It enumerates the victim's MAC addresses and compares it to a hard-coded MAC address value, which is researchers at ThreatPost are saying is likely a default MAC address for the Windows Sandbox network adapter, and if it matches that, the backdoor exits. If not, it then sets up configuration and retrieves a session key for a command and control server. So
Whoa.
there's a
So
lot there.
yeah, so that's crazy. It's basically if if it gets caught in a sandbox environment, it just says nope.
Right.
It's basically it's trying to obfuscate itself, right? It's trying to evade.
Absolutely. So it's, you know, if it's in a sandbox, sandbox is usually set up with the specific intent of capturing malware. And by threat researchers, they use it to capture and then reverse engineer malware and build, detection and response against it. So this is one way malware can prevent itself from being, pulled apart. As it goes up, doesn't execute, right? It hides. And then the second part, which I thought was neat, is that it actually gets a session key for a command and control server. So it seems like it's doing like PKI, or it's encrypting its actual communication, which is very good cybersecurity for your data. So the bad guys are doing it.
So the bad guys are in your network and then encrypting their traffic out of your network.
Yes. Yep.
That's insane.
So the next piece of malware. So you get the backdoor through Sunburst. The second stage comes in through GoldMax, and then we get Sibot. Here's a quick view of that, right? So
Why
the
don't you
command and
zoom in
control
just a
servers
little
are
bit there on that?
yeah, it's probably a little small.
There
So
you
second
go.
stage script is what we just talked about here. This second stage backdoor. There's the command and control server where it is encrypted to, and then Sibot actually is implanted on the file systems of the target computers.
Hmm.
So this one is implemented via VB script. So we're swapping from Go to VB script here. Now, VB script I do know a little bit about because it's been around a very long time, modeled on Visual Basic, but it's using VB script so that it can mimic legitimate Windows tasks because they use VB script still. And it uses its file naming is meant to, kind of look like Windows tasks as well. The scheduled tasking calls a Microsoft HTML application to run Sybot via the obfuscated script. So again, it's evasion that we're doing here.
Mhm.
Um, it's looking first. It looks like legitimate traffic up here with Bing and Facebook. Then it looks like legitimate scripting from Microsoft itself on the file system.
So at this point, any of your fancy software tools, they're not ringing any alarms, right? There's nothing that's standing out that's saying, hey, you need to be alerted to this. They're making it look as legitimate as possible, unless you had a human being looking at this. And even still, maybe they wouldn't know.
Right, especially because again, this is all encapsulated in Orion. So you're having to go through multiple layers of software here to see this malicious activity. So the second stage script then downloads another payload from that remote C2 server. This one's called Goldfinder. This one's written in Golang, and I honestly don't know what the difference between Go and Golang is. I know there's a difference, but it's interesting to see that we have three different languages here for these three pieces. So Goldfinder is really cool. Goldfinder uses a custom HTTP tracer tool that logs the route or hops that a packet takes to reach a hard-coded C2 server. So that's kind of a weird sentence there, but what it's doing is it's identifying HTTP proxy servers and other redirectors such as network security devices, um, and it controls the HTTP request as it travels through the network. So when it's used on a compromised device, it can be used to inform the malicious actor of points of discovery, where it can actually go do things, and if anything is logging its their actions. So like they can actually actively avoid the network by routing their traffic around detection nodes in there.
So we've got three different malware, and it seems like there's a sequencing between it. Like each malware has a particular task that it has to achieve. So if we take a step back here at the big picture, and we can combine all of these individual components, what does it look like is happening from your perspective?
So it looks like what they're trying to do here is establish or undertake evasion, right? Evasion is the main purpose of this. So they want to be able to first, first they have to get into the system. Then they need to be able to install packages secretly, which is where GoldMax comes in, hiding his, Facebook traffic, right? Once they get the malicious package in, this package Sibot allows them to execute code inside the network, again masquerading as actual traffic. So this gives them an evasive way of download, execution, and finally, and this is what I think is really cool, is Gold Finder. Is this is like their active evasion component as well as their component for finding points of entry. So it's both a it's like sniffing for new places to go while also, telling you where all the security nodes are in the system.
Hmm.
Um, so they can stay under the radar. They can move traffic around. They can move it encrypted to their C2 server, and they can execute code all, hopefully without being detected. And they went undetected for a very long time. So it's extremely sophisticated.
So you
Yeah,
have access, code execution, and network flow
yep,
control.
all underneath Orion, like as a completely back. It's like a complete shadow IT built onto your whole network. Pretty crazy.
You can't help but admire the work that went into it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it definitely takes a lot of resources.
Not
So,
just resources, but top talent too. I think that's another thing.
yeah,
But I think we have an attack from abroad next.
yeah. So, think a threat post for that one. This one comes from CISO Magazine. Russian hacker misused Medal of Honor holders' information in order to obtain fraudulent lines of credit through AFIs. So, quick background on that: Air Force Exchange, Army and Air Force Exchange Services (AFIs). They have a special credit line available to those who've received the Medal of Honor, as well as some other, specific things to help out soldiers. So the United States Secret Service, sorry, is investigating this. They found that 22 of 75 living Congressional Medal of Honor recipients were targeted by this, and they threat actors were actually able to obtain like about $55,000 worth of stuff. They actually made transactions, bought things using these lines of credit. Um, what I thought was specifically interesting about this one, though, is that the perpetrator shipped the fraudulently obtained goods to various commercial reshipping companies, which were eventually shipped to different locations across Russia. So one of the individual reshippers said that he became a reshipper after responding to an employment advertisement on a website used by Russians living in the Washington, D.C. area. So these, I don't know if anybody else has run into these before. I used to see these all the time in my job search where you get, like almost spammy job posts where, it doesn't require anything really. You just, all you have to do is get a package, open it up, take a picture, submit it up to this, email address, and then forward the package on. And I know somebody who's done the job, and
$50 an hour, ask no questions.
yeah, I mean,
Start today.
and they're getting paid. Like I knew, like I said, I knew somebody who did this, so they're, it's a legitimate job for, from this person's perspective. But
Mhm.
it's, they always seemed fishy to me. This was something that just really proves it right here, right? So when, what's the catch? Well, this is the catch: is you're probably laundering stolen goods. Um, Now, their individual reshippers can't really get in trouble here because they're working for a company or an employer, right? And so they're legitimately just, basically, they're employed legitimately. But the company who's doing the reshipping, it's hard to say what the impact could be on them. I guess it depends whether or not they knew they were, part of this. But
Yeah, I don't know the legalese behind that, but this is terrible.
yeah,
Medal of Honor recipients
yeah.
being targeted. It just kind of shows there is no mercy in the cyber world.
So
Dollars are dollars.
yeah, absolutely. They don't care, right? Um, So this is an ongoing investigation. We don't yet know how it was initially attained in any great detail. This I'm not going to read. I love I already read this, so I'm not going to read it for you guys watching because it's too long. But we will put a link to this. This is the actual affidavit filing from Agent Matthew K. O'Neill of the United States Secret Service, which, if they're investigating it, is not good stuff. They're good. Um, but and, they already know where some of these emails were going to, so they're on it. I hopefully we'll get to follow up with this one if some more information comes out.
Yeah, those people are definitely getting caught. Like, there's no question behind it. They're gonna get caught. Like, it's happening.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's so much data and there's 6 pages and it's pretty thorough. So yeah, definitely check that out.
Yeah. Hopefully, those guys get their due, and then hopefully the any damages are rectified. I'm sure that AFES or the credit union or whoever is handling that is being pretty understanding in this situation.
In my experience, they're really good about the consumer protection for military personnel. So yeah. This one's interesting. Tether. Yeah. Crypto. So Tether put out a PSA on Twitter that forged documents are circulating online purporting to be between Tether personnel and representatives of Deltec Bank and Trust and others. The documents are bogus, they say. They said they received a ransom demand for 500 Bitcoin, which, what is Bitcoin at today? Still $30,000, something around there.
It's got to be higher than that.
It's a ton of money, though. That's for sure. That they're asking for.
Do some math on the fly here.
Yeah, please do. The sender said that unless they receive the Bitcoin by tomorrow, and this was right at the end of February that they first announced this, they will leak documents to the public in an effort to harm the Bitcoin ecosystem. Now, it is now the 8th of March, and they have yet to leak anything. Tether's final statement here: while we believe this is a pretty sad attempt at a shakedown, we take it seriously. We report the forged communications and the associated ransom demand to law enforcement. As always, we will fully support law enforcement investigation of this extortion scheme. So, since then, nothing has been leaked, which this probably is bogus in that case.
So Bitcoin's at $53,500 right now, and that would have been about a $26 million, almost $27 million ransom.
Reach for the moon.
Yeah, right. But it's interesting how this extortionware starts popping up. We saw this with Accellion. You're starting to see this kind of become a little bit more popularized, where if you don't give us our money, we're going to start putting your stuff out online, and then we're going to start selling it online, and the highest bidder gets it. Could be your competitor. But the twist to this is, what if it happens in reverse? What if someone claims to have stolen something, but the company denies it, or maybe it's true. Maybe it doesn't matter. The perception is still out there in the world, right? And so, what's the damage of the brand? Maybe not so bad. I mean, it would have to be like a fully realized thing. You can't just kind of run on a rumor. But it does kind of bring up this interesting perspective of the extortion, extortioner, the person doing the extortion.
Extorter, I think.
The extorter.
Yeah.
They're in a position where it doesn't matter if they have the documents or not, because there's perception that they have something of value. I mean, they could just go out there and sell it. Now, on the flip side, they could break all of their supply lines, right? If they're used to selling under a name or something like that, and they build trust over it, if they kind of, in this case, if it's an individual that Trolly McTrollface. Yeah, it's just kind of a different angle on extortionware, where it's like maybe someone didn't break into your system, doesn't have any of your data, but claims to.
Right.
And just that claim alone, they're able to sell it to someone willing enough to buy it.
Yeah, I mean, it feeds off the fear. I mean, ransomware is becoming more and more prevalent. We talk about ransomware pretty much every breach report now, and we see, every single day there's some kind of story on ransomware. So, there's probably places are rightfully fearful of it. And if you got somebody comes in here and shows you what looks like legitimate screenshots, it says we got all your stuff. Not every single one of these extortion schemes has resulted in the ransomware actually breaking their systems, right? They breached it, stole it, their systems kept running. They're like, hey, but we have your data anyway.
Hmm.
So just the fear of it is kind of what gives Trolley McTrollface the idea here that he can pull this off. And now Tether obviously they're taking the pretty hard point of no, this is not real. They probably have I'm sure they know what their own documents look like, so that's interesting. But
Well, we don't know, right?
maybe they're not,
They're
maybe
not gonna
maybe not.
come on a platform like Twitter and say, yeah, this is real. Like they're not gonna do that.
Right. So this is where the leaks came through, was Trolley McTrollface. He said the latest Tether leak is an email from Tether to Deltek dated May 23rd, 2020, asking for help in presenting the reserves in the best possible light. The reserves being stakes and other crypto companies as things in that area. This is a crucial piece of the puzzle. So uh, it seems like he's kind of getting at the same thing here, and back to his headline. I said Bitcoin was a Ponzi scheme. So he obviously is like personally motivated, right, against
Hmm.
this. Or I mean, I say it's probably a group of people, most likely. Um, so yeah, you're right here. So in the ZDNet article, I probably should have just
20,
read
24
first.
million
24
at that time.
million at
Yeah.
the time. Yeah. They have currently $72 in Bitcoin at the address that they sent to them. So, uh, you know, they're saying that what they're saying to the company Tether is that leaking this would harm the Bitcoin ecosystem. So they're threatening the Bitcoin ecosystem. What you just mentioned before, the brand damage. They're trying to claim that
Hmm.
the brand damage is already happening because we have all your stuff. Um, Really, we just have some more statements from them saying, it's these are bogus. Tether's not paying. I mean, I don't know how you could pay that much money anyway. That's ridiculous. So
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you're earning, whatever you're trying to protect, right? It might be
right.
worth it to them, but it is an interesting thought. I'm just gonna say this. Keep an eye out for the story. Maybe in the future. I don't know if this is the end of it. Like it seems like both sides are pretty adamant in their stances, and you know they're doing it publicly. So of course they're gonna defend their stance. There's I don't know if they genuinely do have something worth Tether paying for, then Tether's never going to say that they are paid for it. They'll never admit to it, So publicly, they look pretty good by saying, no, it's a fake, it's false. But behind closed doors, maybe they pay it. I don't know. Maybe it's a little too like going down the rabbit hole, but I'm just trying to think of like how this scenario could possibly play out, and I just see this becoming another headline down the road. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, everything seems to keep popping back up this year. That's been kind of the theme too, huh? So here's something a little bit new, and this was really interesting to me. So there's a malicious code attack against Target, Amazon, Lyft, Slack, Zillow, and of course a bunch of other people, as there usually is.
Those are
So
big data
those are
platforms. Every
huge
single one of them.
platforms.
Target too. I don't.
Yes,
People don't really know. Target's a huge data company.
yeah. They're they. I think they actually sell parts of that platform now too. What's funny is Netflix too. Netflix actually became a pretty big cloud host for stuff for a while.
Well, no, I
Um,
mean like Target in terms of how they track their customer user behavior
oh,
and
sure.
data. There's a really good example of a father getting a mailer from Target saying it was like selling baby clothes or something like that,
Okay.
and it was addressed to his daughter. And his daughter was like 16 at the time, and the father was so upset that he went
Oh
to
man.
Target and he said, "Why are you giving my daughter, these ideas and everything like that?" Turns out Target knew
She was
that his
buying.
daughter was
Oh
pregnant
man.
before the
Yep.
daughter knew she was pregnant based on purchasing behavior. So when I say Target is a data company, Target is a data
Yeah.
company.
Man. And so, that's just for, selling baby stuff, but that right there is effectively what like the NSA did under, the all those programs that Snowden talked about. Like that's what they do with the data is they build profiles, but looking for terrorists, not pregnant 16-year-olds.
Well, You can make a lot of money off of a pregnant woman or
That is,
children.
yeah. I mean, yeah, the consumer industry, and this is why these, I mean, Amazon consumers, Lyft also consumers, Zillow, I mean, ultimately that's what it's all about, is if you've got clients and you've got money, then you have data, and so they want to
Hmm.
go after that data. In this case, it wasn't a ransomware, it was actually a code bomb, which means they were able to get these companies to install malicious code of their own accord, right? What's also kind of unique about this, well, maybe not unique, but something we haven't talked about before, and what I thought was really cool, is that these were actually weaponized proof of concept codes. So a researcher had already created a proof of concept code for a dependency confusion exploit in this npm public code repository. This is the one that was, this is the start of it right here, is kind of what everyone was trying to get to and where they got bombed from. So a threat researcher, let's see, his name is Burson. I think that's the only Alex Burson. There we go. He answered a bug bounty call to, you know, find any kind of vulnerabilities. He created this POC attack that he uploaded to GitHub, and he wanted to see if it would be imported, right? Just to see if people would import it of their own accord, developers from anywhere. Apple, Microsoft, Netflix, PayPal, Shopify, Tesla, and Uber all downloaded this POC code, right? So he proved that this can happen. It's there. He got his
So,
$130,000 in bug bounties for that.
so real quick, so he put this onto GitHub. And explain GitHub real quick for anyone who doesn't really understand just the basic premise of it.
Yeah, so GitHub is, I mean, it's an online code repository, and there's a public side and there's also private sides for companies to develop their code, publish their code, create readmes, and you can also download it from there. And it's basically github.com/, the it'll be a project or username, and then there will be a repo repository name, and you can
Yeah.
just download it straight from there, or from your computer. If you've got the command line, you can do git clone, and you actually pull down all of that code. It's right there on your computer.
Yeah. So tons of applications with that. But in this case, he uploaded it to GitHub and then people from these companies downloaded it.
Correct.
Wow. Okay. And out of that he got a bug bounty. Okay. That's insane to me.
Yeah. Well, he built the POC code. Um, so that was a big part of that. It wasn't just that they were able to download it, but his
Yeah.
code was able to, show and do a callback, right? Um, but here's where things get really interesting. So when this happens, this means that the npm public code repository, those developers now know that this exploit exists, right? Because a bug bounty has been paid, somebody found it, somebody reported it. So it's up to them to now patch this out of their system, and it's up to everybody who uses this repo to update to the latest version of the repo to patch out the vulnerability on their systems. One of those two steps did not happen, right? So what happened later is more than one attacker copied that POC code and actually weaponized it. And so what they mean is, instead of it just calling back and saying, oh, here's where I got installed, and you can say that, oh, look, Apple installed this, it actually goes in and reads bash history, it reads Etsy shadow files. And the way they do this is, you know, they've already got the proof of concept for how to get the code there. All they need to do is change what it does once it's been delivered. So it's relatively easy to just make it do whatever you want it to. So there were several copycat packages that got put out there. Now, the way that they got people to download these malicious packages instead of just the proof of concept code was they altered the name of their project to look similar to commonly downloaded packages. You just misspell something, right? Typo squatting or brand jacking. So if you know it's something people commonly download, you can make it look like it's them. It's very typical. It's like what they do with phishing emails.
I see. It's a layer of social engineering kind of on top of this attack here.
As with most things, it requires somebody to click a link on the user end, right?
Yeah, right. Doesn't matter how much you just spent on that fancy software.
Yeah, and I mean, you trust what's coming from GitHub for your network side, so it's not really going to get looked at there. Now, it should be caught when it executes on the user systems, unless there's nothing written for it. So, if these are dev systems, there's not going to be some heavy-handed security on there. There's probably going to be a lot more, exceptions because they're developing things, and so it's going to look weird if you've got too much, you know, execution prevention on the endpoints. So it is a good target.
Hmm.
Um, so Amazon, Lyft, Slack, and Zillow all ended up with copycat packages. Now, what was a little unique and cool about this is that each of these packages did have specifically targeted ones built. So for Amazon, they built AMZN, for Zillow, ZG-rentals. So whoever took these, they had a target in mind. They knew exactly what they wanted to do, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like you said, the naming convention for those look legitimate, right? Like
Right,
AMZN, that looks like their ticker symbol. You know.
right. Yeah, and they hide it up here with this package that they're already downloading anyway, because you can see who's pulling stuff off of GitHub too. Like you can see pull requests, and with a little bit of research, you can usually figure out who that is. If it's somebody big like Amazon. So what this whole thing was trying to do? Well, there's a couple packages, but all of them look to be just trying to steal data of any kind, whether it be code or passwords. Because where is it here? See .bash history. That will actually show all the commands that were typed in bash since the history file was created, right? There's a limit you can put on there, but it can be days, days of stuff. It can be code you're working on. It can be passwords, anything.
Yeah. It kind of starts up an interesting conversation of when do you use third party or in GitHub's case open software. um I don't know if solutions is the right word, or code in general, versus kind of building out your own code base, or maybe augmenting your code to fit in. We were talking about this offline. What did forked?
Yeah. So if you're using stuff like this, basically how they were attacked is because they just installed plugins and used them, which is a very common practice, especially in agile development today. You don't want to reinvent wheels, right? So you just go out there and find wheels to put on your car. The problem is, you know, a lot of these shops end up only plugging in, right? They don't go over it and really evaluate that code for security, for these types of exploits before plugging it in, right? Because you also have to, and that takes time and that's expensive. You have to have people who know secure code. But this is the problem with not doing it is, you can end up with malicious things either in legitimate plugins or because you're looking for a legitimate plugin and you ended up with a copycat or somebody trying to trick you. And so yeah, you have to take it and make it your own, and it's called a fork. I think there's some other names for it too, depending on uh, what exact realm of IT or development you're in, but that's the term I know it as. But you're taking a copy of the main package and you're making changes to it so that it's not entirely unique, but it's different enough. And that's a really great way to protect against this, because then people have to go in and they have to write code to look specifically like or trick your specific fork of it, rather than just poisoning a place that people typically go on GitHub. It's almost like a watering hole attack too.
Mm.
People go to GitHub.
Yeah, it kind of is. Unfortunately, I feel like a lot of the reasons why people go to that type of solution is monetary focused, right? It's
Yeah.
because it's the cheaper solution, to hire out devs
Yep.
especially if you're a shop that doesn't have anything to do with development, right? But you're using a piece of software. Do you go and put a dev team on retainer to write it, maintain it, and continue to push out new code? Like that seems like a lot of effort versus, hey, go copy that thing off GitHub and good enough. But good enough is always what enables these types of attacks to happen. And that's when, we think about these big names like, oh my gosh, how did this Fortune 500 company get hacked? Well, because they cut corners, generally speaking, or, you know, in the case of SolarWinds, it was just super sophisticated, and I don't think I mean, it was just a matter of time for something like that to happen.
Absolutely. And I've said it before, shift left, that's what we're talking about is you got to get security in there sooner. You it's good to use plugins and then run all your code and compile it and then have somebody look at it. But it's better to know that what you're getting is secure from the outset because it was built that way.
Yeah. Well, Josh, thanks for going through all of this research. Did you have any other final thoughts?
I was just going to mention about the amount of research we did there. This was kind of a tough week to pick because there was so much. On just one of the few feeds I get my breaches from, there was like four a day, four major ones that were newsworthy per day, um, which
How does
uh,
that compare?
I mean it's usually about half of that on
Okay.
any given feed. I mean, there's obviously more breaches than that per day, but I mean, big newsworthy ones, like it was just there was so much. It was all over the place. There was, you know, more of everybody attacked. There was entire countries, labor divisions attacked. There was plenty of more hospitals attacked. Yeah.
But you said newsworthy, so yeah, I mean that makes me wonder if it's man, everything's going digital, and security needs to be as important as keeping your servers running. I mean, it's gotten to the point where you can't afford to live in this day and age without taking security seriously.
It's technical debt and it needs to be treated like any other technical debt. There's a chart somewhere if you go look up, technical debt and all those development ideologies in project management. But basically, the rule is the longer you wait to fix something, the more expensive it becomes to fix. And nothing is more true in that than cybersecurity breaches. It is so much cheaper to prevent it than to deal with it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great way, I think, to end this episode. Well, thank you, everyone out there who's listening. If you liked it, like, subscribe, do all that good stuff. And until next week.